Time to saddle up, because today we're talking about the Primaris Bikers, the Outriders. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel, where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. In today's video we're taking another look at the Outrider squad, going over their datasheet, chapter synergies, other buffs and synergies within the Space Marine Codex, talking a bit about how I'd use them in game, and finishing up with a comparison against Space Marine bikes. Plenty to talk about for these guys, so let's jump straight into it. So Outrider squads are a fast attack choice for Codex Space Marines. They used to be 45 points a model, but in the January points adjustment they went up to 50. Like the Suppressors and the Eliminators, they're quite inflexible in terms of squad numbers. You only get 3 of them, 2 regular Outriders and 1 Outrider Sergeant. For those 50 points you do get quite a respectable stat line. 14-inch move, hitting on 3s, strength 4, toughness 5, a big 4 wounds, 2 attacks, leadership 7 and a 3+ save. Equipment wise they all have a heavy bolt pistol, a twin bolt rifle mounted on the front of the bike, an Astartes chainsword for an extra attack and AP-1 melee, and frag and crack grenades. That twin bolt rifle is rapid fire 2 up to 30-inch range, so it means that you'll have quite a long way to reach out and touch enemy units at the back of the board. In theory you've got a 44-inch average threat range, and with bolter discipline it means that they'll always be firing 4 shots. These guys are near guaranteed to be able to put some firepower virtually anywhere on the board. In melee they typically have 4 attacks due to shock assault, but the Outriders also have a devastating charge special rule, which means that each time this unit fights, if it made a charge move this turn, then you get an additional 2 attacks per model. Now this is a kind of crazy sounding rule, as very few other Space Marines get 2 attacks extra on top of shock assault, but really at the points cost that these guys are, they kind of need it to compete. They cost twice as much as many other Space Marine options, and 50 points is still a reasonable investment for 6 attacks with a chainsword. I would bear in mind that you only get those extra attacks if you do the charging. If you get charged or in an ongoing fight, then you won't get access to them, which is a bit of a downside. Otherwise, they also have the turbo boost special rule, meaning that if they advance they just add an extra 6 inches, so 20-inch movements there. And if they're within the Dark Angels chapter, they get the Raven Wing keyword and all the fun that unlocks. Overall, the Space Marine Outrider squad is some big chunky sturdy models, with a little bit of ranged anti-infantry, and a fairly decent amount of anti-infantry melee power. They are also core, so they can get rerolls from characters. Now, as a core unit with both fighting and shooting capability, they do have synergy with basically every single chapter that you can have. Ultramarines could be handy for falling back and shooting, and maybe some pre-game redeployment with their stratagem. White Scars might be one of the best chapters for them. We all know their synergies with bikes. They can advance and charge, so 20-inch movement, and then a charge after that. And it's quite handy for the Outriders because they can also fall back and charge, as they're always going to want to be charging to get those extra attacks. Their assault doctrine also works excellently for them, making those chainswords AP-2 and damage 2 will go a long way. And even when they're advancing they can still shoot if you're willing to spend a command point for it, as they have an advance and shoot stratagem with bikes. Definitely stronger in the White Scars than they are in most other places. Out of the other more Codex compliant chapters, Iron Hands are a bit tougher than normal. Those Feel No Pains can make the squad very sturdy. Raven Guard will be tougher at range with that cover save and be a bit better at chopping up characters. Salamanders could be pretty handy in melee with that +1 to wound stratagem, really helps amp up strength 4 weapons. Imperial Fists will be more shooty than normal, those bolters will ignore cover and get exploding hits on 6s. And Black Templars will have more reliable charges. Good synergy with their assault doctrine, which is again quite good with low strength weapons, and also the option of devout push, which can be annoying on fast moving units that get in the opponent's face. Perhaps the single most powerful chapter though are the Dark Angels Raven Wing. Dark Angels just have so many synergies going with bikes and Outriders that it's a bit silly. If they stay still they'll get +1 to hit, and they'll usually get +1 to hit if the opponent does the charging, and if they move they get a 5+ invul, though if they advance then that can go up to a 4+. They get extra movement in their unique doctrine turn 1, they can get OBSEC in a Raven Wing Outrider squad, they have useful stratagems including pre-game movement or falling back after their fight, so your opponent can't even attack them back, and what's more they also have access to the Raven Wing Apothecary as well, who can actually keep pace for them, give them some Feel No Pain, and even revive entire models from the dead. Dark Angels are really solid right now, particularly with anything mounted on a bike. Otherwise Space Wolves and Blood Angels are both pretty decent in melee. Maybe Space Wolves might compete a bit with Thunder Wolves, kind of similarly priced models that also hit a fair bit harder and can get storm shields. But I think that Blood Angels can actually work fairly well with them. Again, their +1 to wound works really well with a flurry of low strength attacks. They'd even be wounding things like battle tanks on 4s or 5s. Finally, Deathwatch have quite a lot of good rerolls going, and can also get OBSEC Outriders by using their kill teams. In general though, I certainly think they punch a bit above their weight in Raven Wing, and maybe White Scars and Blood Angels too. There aren't really any chapters that don't give them at least some benefit though. In terms of other buffs and synergies that aren't locked to chapters, as core units they can get some quite good character buffs. A Primaris Chaplain on bike or a Captain on bike both can be very good for boosting damage, perhaps some big rerolls to hit in close combat, or other fun litanies that your Chaplain can bring. It could be an interesting option to put the Rights of War Warlord trait on the bike character that's accompanying them. Then they can also have OBSEC as well, which as with Dark Angels or Deathwatch is really quite scary on fast moving, fairly durable units. If they can ever get in range of a Chief Apothecary though, that's generally going to give them a good time. They can both grant a feel no pain, heal injured models, or bring back entire models from the dead. Maybe it might be best to try and start near though, as opposed to actually trying to follow them around, as the Apothecary will slow them down a lot. It's a bit more of a viable strategy in Blood Angels or Raven Wing, both of which can get faster Apothecaries than normal. The Outriders actually have a ton of stratagem options from the core codex. Perhaps that's normal. One of the most universally useful ones is Transhuman Physiology, which will be one command point on these. With a bunch of wounds at toughness 5, small arms aren't going to be massively affected, and they're a good choice for the opponent trying to target them with anti-tank weapons. Only being able to be wounded on 4s is quite nice against those. Otherwise, I think that the options are fairly niche. Gene Wrought Might can give them a little bit of extra melee damage. Adaptive Strategy could be useful in the right circumstance, a bit pricey at 2 CP, but you could potentially hoover up extra AP on their shooting and extra damage in combat. Maybe could be nice in conjunction with one of the chapters with a unique assault doctrine like White Scars. Hit and run warfare could allow you to fall back and shoot if it really doesn't make sense to remain in combat and you want a bit more bolter fire. And Skilled Riders could give you a -1 to hit if you advance, but I think typically you won't want to be advancing with these most of the time, as you'd be giving up a fair amount of bolter fire. So how would I think about using Outriders in game then? I think you want to be trying to plan to use them with some way that actually makes good use of their mobility. For the points they're not enormously tough, so it might be a good idea to try and hide them behind line of sight blocking terrain, tow them into dense cover and take a small movement hit, or cuddle up to an Apothecary's aura for some feel no pain. They might also be a fairly decent choice for deploying on the flanks rather than in the centre of the table, as they're not going to be able to be ignored due to that great movement. If your opponent does really start going to town on them with heavy weapons, Transhuman Physiology could be a good shout. Even if they die, they might soak up a fair bit more firepower. Generally, when they're moving forward, they're going to want to harass light infantry. Those chainswords and bolters aren't really all that good for much else, and I think with their good movement and good range on their guns, they're quite a good choice for bullying weaker targets, hoovering up squads of light infantry that were scoring objectives, and pumping a whole load of long-range bolt shots into the backfield, trying to ping a few models that thought they were safe. They could make an okay escort for things like chaplains or captains, who might be able to pack a bit more punch against hard targets themselves. I think perhaps more than their damage output and durability, having a few fast units can just help you win the game in general. They can be good for a sacrificial unit with move blocking with their huge bases. If they could pin an important enemy unit in their deployment zone turn 1, that could make a big deal as to whether or not it gets to contribute to much of the rest of the game. And with that good movement, they should usually be able to reach objectives or jump into table quarters and help you hoover up victory points as you go along. Overall though, I would say that they're probably more of a fairly costed unit in the Space Marine Codex. Compared with a few other options, I must say they're not enormously stand out for the points. You'd really have to weigh them up against things like Vanguard veterans, are generally going to be tougher if you take Storm Shields, and pack a bit more of a generalist punch in close combat as they get access to higher AP weapons. Another big competitor for the Outriders is of course the Bike Squad, so I thought we'd just take a bit of a comparison to see who performs better out of the new bikers or the old. Space Marine bikes are 30 points per model, they only get 1 attack base and 3 wounds. They also can get chainswords built into the model, so they have reasonably similar melee, but they do have quite a lot more options than the Outrider squad, being able to take really big units of them, being able to take attack bikes, getting a bit of firepower from special weapons, or taking some power weapons on the sergeant. The units have far more similarities than differences though. In terms of damage output and durability, for range damage, the bikes will typically win. If we compare an 150 point unit of 3 Outriders or 5 bikes, the bike squad will average about 5.6 dead orcs or 2.2 wounds to Space Marines, where the Outriders only get 4 and 2. The Outriders will likely pull ahead against anything with a 2+ save, but you're not going to be doing an enormous amount of damage either way. For melee damage, the Outriders do pull ahead a bit. Our 5-man bike squad will kill 5.3 orcs or 2.7 Space Marine wounds. whereas the Outriders are a little bit ahead for 6.3 orcs and a bit over 3 wounds to Space Marines. I would bear in mind though that it does rely on the Outriders doing the charging. I know they probably will be most of the time with that good movement, but if they're ever countercharged themselves or are locked in combat, then the bike squad actually gets better in combat than the Outriders again. Finally, in terms of durability, it's a little bit more mixed. The bike squad has a few more wounds, so is a bit more durable to bolt rifles, and then it kind of depends exactly what sort of multiples the damage is coming in. If it's damage 2 weapons like overcharged plasma, the bikes are far more durable, but if it's something that's damage D3 or damage 3, then it tends to be a small victory for the Outriders. For example, it would take an average of 11 Thunderhammer hits to kill the bikes, but 13 to kill the Outriders. For raw numbers, I would give the bikes the win on durability, but I would bear in mind that Outriders have the option of transhuman physiology, which certainly has the potential to make up the difference. Overall, the Outriders are slightly better damage on the charge, get access to a couple of useful stratagems such as transhuman physiology or gene-wrought might, and their bolt rifles do have the advantage of slightly longer range. For the bike squad, they're generally better at range damage output and durability, and also better in melee when they're being charged rather than doing the charging. I also think that for bikes a competitive option will be a cheap lightning claw on the sergeant, or taking a heavier close combat weapon such as a power fist or thunderhammer if you really wanted to punch against hard targets. Being able to take an attack bike is no bad thing either, as they're quite an efficient way of getting some multi-melter shots on the table. Overall, between the two Space Marine bikers, I have to admit that the standard bikers are looking a little bit better on the raw stats compared with the Outriders right now. I think it's a bit telling that in quite a few Dark Angels lists, we're seeing people tending to run more small squads of bikers with a lightning claw as opposed to Outrider units. I don't think that the difference is absolutely enormous, to be honest. You're certainly not going to be at masses of disadvantage using Outriders over bikes, but I'd say that the bikes do have it in a direct contest right now. So anyway, hope you've enjoyed a bit of a breakdown of Outriders and their competitors. Look forward to hearing any further insights down in the comments below, and how your Primaris bikers have been faring on the battlefield. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly be keeping up plenty of Space Marine content coming out, with new 40k videos coming out pretty much every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the content on the channel, I would just like to mention that I do have a Patreon page, which you can find down in the video description. Making all the YouTube videos does take a lot of time, and if you are enjoying regularly, then any support is enormously appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, such as seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry to the prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.